An old telegraph message was displayed at the World War II exhibition. While visitors were trying to decode the cipher, 78-year-old antique dealer Arthur quietly approached. In 30 seconds, he decoded the entire message. Operation Neptune, pre-D-Day, agent communications. Everyone was amazed, but the real shock came with Arthur's added sentence, "I wrote this code. Welcome to Veterans Untold Stories." Before we begin this powerful story, tell us which city you're watching from in the comments, and if you believe untold veteran stories deserve to be brought to light, hit that subscribe button. These stories deserve to be remembered. Arthur Morrison's antique shop was located on the ground floor of a two-story Victorian building built in 1897 on Main Street in the small town of Bennington, Vermont. The shop windows displayed old clocks, silver candlesticks, vintage books, and various items from every era. Every object in the shop had a story, and Arthur, at 78 years old, knew them all. Arthur had been working in this shop for 40 years. He was medium height, gray-haired, always dressed neatly, and treated his customers kindly. The blue eyes behind his glasses were always attentive and alert. His speaking style was polite, but brief. He didn't enjoy unnecessary conversation. The shop's customers were usually collectors, antique enthusiasts, and tourist families. Arthur welcomed each customer like a guest, providing detailed information about the items they wanted, which period they were from, how they were made, where they came from. Arthur's historical knowledge was impressive. The townspeople loved Arthur. He was reliable, honest, and hardworking. He had never married and lived alone. In his spare time, he read books, tended to his garden, and rarely left town. He didn't talk about his past, and when asked, he would say old days and move on. Arthur's greatest expertise was items from the World War II era. When he saw objects from this period, his eyes would light up and he would notice even the smallest details. Customers sometimes asked how he acquired this knowledge, and he would say research and reading. That October day, Margaret Williams, director of the Bennington Historical Museum, had invited Arthur to a special exhibition. World War II Secret Stories exhibition was opening, and Margaret wanted to benefit from Arthur's expertise. "Arthur," Margaret had said, "I need your knowledge about some items in this exhibition. Maybe you can verify their authenticity." Arthur had accepted. On Saturday morning, he went to the museum. The exhibition hadn't opened to the public yet. There were only a few history enthusiasts and museum staff. The exhibition was impressive. Old uniforms, weapons, maps, photographs, and documents. Each display case told a different story: resistance movements, spies, secret operations. Arthur was quietly touring the exhibition. He carefully examined each object, sometimes nodding approvingly, sometimes frowning. Margaret was following him, asking questions. "Do you think this radio set is original?" Margaret asked. Arthur examined the radio. "Yes, 1943, British SOE radio, the type given to agents in France." "What about this photograph?" Arthur looked at the photograph. "London, around 1944. The buildings in the background are real." Margaret was impressed. Arthur's knowledge was encyclopedic. Just then, they came to a display case in the far corner of the exhibition. Inside was an old telegraph message, with coded numbers and letters on yellowed paper. The sign next to it read, "Coded telegraph message, 1944, unknown source." 3 or 4 visitors had gathered around the display case, trying to decode the cipher. A young man was researching with a phone app. An elderly woman was taking notes. "This cipher is very complex," said the young man. World War II era codes were really difficult. Arthur quietly approached the group. He took off his glasses and leaned toward the display case. He examined the telegraph message for 30 seconds. Then he straightened up. Operation Neptune, he said quietly. Everyone turned to him. What did you say? Asked the young man. This code is related to Operation Neptune, pre-D-Day agent communications, May 1944. The visitors looked at each other in amazement. Margaret approached. Arthur, how did you decode this cipher so quickly? Arthur hesitated for a moment. Then he took an old notebook from his pocket and turned pages. The same code system, the same encryption method. I wrote this code. There was silence. No one knew what to say. Margaret initially thought it was a joke. What do you mean? Arthur looked at the display case again. In 1944, I worked for the Office of Strategic Services, OSS. This telegraph is one of the reports I wrote. The young man couldn't believe it. Were you an OSS agent? Arthur nodded. Coding specialist. In London, then in France. Margaret's heart rate accelerated. She had a real OSS veteran in her museum. Arthur, are you sure? This is a very big claim. Arthur handed the notebook to Margaret. Inside were dozens of coded messages, code tables, handwritten notes from the 1940s. I've been carrying this notebook with me since 1942. Habit. Margaret flipped through the pages. Every page was a historical treasure. Personal names, place names, operation codes. This is incredible, but why did you never tell anyone? Arthur smiled. No one asked. And at that time, this information was very classified. I got used to staying silent. From that moment on, everything changed. Margaret excitedly began asking Arthur questions. Other visitors also approached and started listening. How did you join the OSS? Margaret asked. Arthur gathered his memories. In 1942, I was studying mathematics at Harvard. I was talented in encryption. The government hired me. Where did you work? First training in Washington, then sent to London. We worked together with the British SOE. We provided communication with resistance groups in France. Was it dangerous? Arthur thought. It was mostly desk work, but sometimes I went to the field too. In France, coordination work before the Normandy landing. The young man asked, were you there on D-Day? Yes, but not on the beach, in the background. Communications and coordination. Margaret continued, seizing the opportunity. Arthur, would you share these stories? Maybe we could organize an interview? Arthur hesitated. These are topics I haven't talked about for 80 years. I don't know. But it's important for history. You're a living witness. Arthur looked at the display cases again. Maybe some stories should be told. A week later, a special event was organized at the Bennington Historical Museum. A program titled Interview with OSS veteran Arthur Morrison. Townspeople and history enthusiasts from surrounding counties came. Arthur was going to speak in front of such a large crowd for the first time in his life. He was excited, but ready. I'm 78 years old, he began. I'm telling these stories in such detail for the first time. For the next 2 hours, Arthur told the unknown aspects of World War II. The establishment of the OSS, encryption techniques, secret operations in Europe. We weren't just technicians who decoded ciphers, he said. Sometimes we went to the field and supported agents. I went to France 6 times, met with resistance groups. The crowd was listening spellbound. My most difficult moment, Arthur continued, was an operation near Paris in March 1944. We were caught by a German patrol. We hid for 2 days, then finally escaped. But those 2 days were the longest 2 days of my life. Someone asked, "Were you afraid?" Constantly. But we had to do the job. We wanted the war to end so we could go home. What happened after the war? Arthur smiled. The OSS was disbanded. I returned to civilian life. I finished university, worked in companies for a while. In 1983, I moved here and bought the antique shop. Why antique dealing? I wanted to be involved with history, but not with secret history, with objects everyone could see. After the interview, many people approached Arthur. They thanked him, asked questions, took photos. Margaret said, "Arthur, this should just be the beginning. More people need to hear these stories." Arthur agreed. Over the following months, he participated in various events. He gave talks at schools, gave interviews for history magazines. But what he enjoyed most was chatting with young visitors in the antique shop. He told them that history wasn't just in books, that every object had a story. One day, a 16-year-old high school student came. "Mr. Morrison," he said, "can you help me with my history homework?" "Of course." "What's the topic?" "Spies in World War II." Arthur smiled. "A nice topic. First know this. We didn't feel like heroes in our time. We were just doing our job." "But how could you do these things? Weren't you afraid?" Arthur thought. "We were afraid, of course, but we had a purpose. We were fighting for freedom. This made us strong." The young man was impressed. "Can I write these stories?" "Of course. But remember, the real heroes were those who died in the war. I'm just a lucky one who survived." Arthur's story appeared in local newspapers, then in national media. Articles titled "Vermont's Secret Hero" were written. But Arthur didn't want to become famous. He just continued working in the antique shop, helping history lovers. A year later, the museum opened a special exhibition in Arthur's honor. Arthur's personal belongings, notes, and photographs were displayed in the Arthur Morrison and OSS Legacy exhibition. At the opening ceremony, Arthur spoke, "This exhibition is not just my story. It's the story of thousands of nameless heroes who served in World War II. Today, Arthur is 81 years old. He still runs the antique shop, still chats with visitors. But now, he talks not only about antiques, but also about history. I'm lucky," he says. "I both lived history and can tell it." And he always adds, "Real history is not hidden in museums, but in living people. Listen to everyone. Everyone has a story." Arthur's story shows us that heroes can be found not only on battlefields, but also in antique shops. Sometimes the biggest secrets are hidden in the most ordinary places. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone like this? Someone working an ordinary job, but hiding an extraordinary past? Shop owner, teacher, neighbor, who knows what historical stories they carry? Share their names in the comments. Tell their stories. Because at Veterans Untold Stories, we believe that real history is hidden not in books, but in living people. Sometimes the greatest heroism is hidden in the quietest lives. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe. Help keep these forgotten stories alive. Until we meet in the next video. And remember, if one day in an antique shop, the elderly owner's historical knowledge surprises you, maybe look twice. Maybe you're standing in front of a living history book,